Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. An acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for
Can you guys hear me?
Thank you for taking time for hemp. Yes, we can. I'm your host, Casper Leach. You are listening to the live broadcast of Time for Hemp all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com, AM/FM stations all across America, and on the Roku network. I want to give a big shout out to all of my friends up in Canada and say thank you to KDK Distributors for being nice enough to give us a grant to keep us loud, proud, and strong, and also a big thank you to Head Shop Canada for being nice enough to also do the same. We had planned on kicking off a big special tomorrow, but we're kind of starting it today. Do want to remind people that tomorrow we will be getting an hour earlier in the day. We normally start at 10 a.m. Tomorrow we will be on from 9 a.m. Pacific Standard to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard. The Time for Hemp Global Summit begins tomorrow morning with a great list of panelists and moderators. But today we are lucky enough to what I call have a moderator and a keynote speaker on the program, moderated today by Paul Stanford, and the keynote speaker is Todd McCormick. And Todd, I tell you, I want to thank you for being nice enough to take a few moments and join us here on the big broadcast.
It's my pleasure, Casper. Thank you for spending so much time on such an important subject.
And Paul, I want to thank you for being nice enough to also every Thursday be part of our family here on the big broadcast.
You're welcome, Casper. Thank you.
And today's topic we're kicking off is the evolution of cannabis in Europe and the cultural impact that it's had. And Todd, you and Paul both have a tremendous amount of input on that topic, and I thought we might open up with you.
Well, Paul and I have both been studying hemp for a very long time. We were both fortunate enough to be very close to Jack Herer and work on his seminal book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, with him. And when researching that book, it became really obvious to me that when you think back to, say, Columbus's time, when he discovered the New World, this was 300 years before the invention of the cotton gin. This was almost 400 years before the invention of this synthetic, like nylon, that we would go on to replace the cotton with. And when you think back to where Columbus was in 1492, much of his ship and much of everything around him, the clothing he wore, the paper he used, the ropes, the riggings, the paints, the varnishes, only came from the cannabis plant. And when you think about that, the cultural evolution of Europe is and was greatly dependent on their application of cannabis industrially. And I was asked a question yesterday, what I thought was the biggest, basically, and best breakthrough for cannabis. And I had to say it was cannabis sativa L, because when the Indo-Europeans and the Asians started using cannabis as a textile, that's when human evolution really took off. You think, Paul?
Yeah, I of course agree. You go back to prehistoric civilizations in Central Asia, and you see that cannabis is cultivated thousands of years prior to the written word. And then you look at the first text in China, in present-day India, and they both talked about hemp as being the most important crop. So it goes back, as we know, at least 12,000 years, and maybe more than 25,000 years that cannabis has been cultivated by human beings. And, you can just look at a wolf and then look at a Chihuahua or a Rottweiler and know that we've changed that species a great deal over the past 7,000 years. So cannabis and humans have co-evolved just like that, each to meet each other's needs. And so our nutritional requirements perfectly match the amino acid profile and the essential fatty acid profile of hemp seed. And of course, cannabis flowers have THC and other chemicals that mimic brain and nervous system neurotransmitters. So we've co-evolved for a long time, perhaps longer than any other two species. So we have this symbiotic relationship that continues to this day. And it's a shame that, certain economic forces starting about 100 years ago started to spread a lot of misinformation about it. I have a large collection of cannabis antique medical marijuana containers. And what amazes me is that a lot of them, starting about 100 years ago, were marked poison. So I just wonder why, cannabis has no lethal dose. You can take as much as you can possibly take and you're not going to die. So I just wonder why it was labeled poison 100 years ago. What do you think, Todd?
Well, I think that in the way that they use the term might be a little bit different from the way we use the term now, whereas in a sense poison was more of a toxin, and they would put it on things that were just anything that could hurt your skin, hurt your in any way. Now I think of it at the highest degree of the definition of the word, like, you can kill somebody, but I think it was more like of something that could toxify or if you used in a concentrated manner, something you should be concerned about. When we launched the museum in Barcelona, for those people listening, there is a new Barcelona museum that is dedicated to cannabis culture and hemp history. And when we launched that, Ben Dronkers, the gentleman at the museum, has a vast collection of medicinal bottles. And when you look back, I think that their use of the word poison was almost like a disclaimer, like their way of the little legal fine print. It's like, oh yeah, and by the way, there's the list of things that could happen. And I, like you, Paul, don't really see the toxicity of cannabis really makes sense per se why they would put poison on something that's not poisonous. But I think it could have just been the companies back in the time trying to cover themselves.
Oh, yeah, that could be it. That could be it for sure.
It's interesting in the news today. There's the news literally today is that hemp is used in over 25,000 products now, including the new BMW, the electric BMW that is getting all the news today and yesterday, has hemp in it, as does actually all the BMWs, Jaguars, Mercedes, even the Bugatti has hemp in it grown in northern Holland by the same gentleman, Ben Dronkers, that owns the hemp and marijuana museums located in both Barcelona and Amsterdam. And it's pretty amazing how he has been able to get hemp back into the commodities around him in Europe, because when the companies are looking for environmental alternatives to some of the products that they're already consuming, they are compelled under European environmental law to use products like hemp. And it's great to see these companies starting to embrace it. So now all of the more expensive lines of Mercedes and BMW, the 7 Series, the 5 Series, all the S Series, SLs have hemp in them. And it's an amazing what when you look at it, 20 years ago, none of those companies were using hemp. And I've been pressuring Ben to say, this is what has to happen in North America, because the farmers in America are being ripped off. 100 years ago, special interests came in after World War II and reorganized the way that the government did business. Everybody listening should take the time to watch a wonderful documentary called Why We Fight, because after World War II, the armament division of the military-industrial complex went crazy and basically took over our government. They waged wars all over the world, and they reorganized the way we were allowed as consumers to basically live. Because farmers, when you think about this, who had for generations since the basically the moving of westward from the people that came here originally. As we went west, we planted hemp. All of our covered wagons were made out of canvas. When you have canvas, it was from cannabis, so all of this wild hemp growing in places like Nebraska is from the settlers. And when you look at the fact that now these same farmers are not even allowed to process the hemp growing on their property, it's a little ridiculous, because what's happened is all of these big businesses after World War II came up with the synthetic solutions to hemp, helped to keep hemp outlawed, and has kept farmers basically in a stranglehold. And
I often say that, you know, marijuana prohibition is really about fuel, fiber, money, power, and the continued centralization of economic and political control. They just made up this whole marijuana myth to, you know, have the economic markets concentrate on petrochemical alternatives and synthetic alternatives and things that are capital intensive. So most of us can't play that game. You know, it takes tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to drill for petroleum. It takes tens of billions of dollars to process it into fuel and other products. But you can get 300 gallons of diesel fuel from an acre of hemp with the residual 30 tons of fiber and 3 tons of food. And you just take that hemp seed oil, pour it right into your diesel engine, turn the key, and you can drive around.
Back in 1916, the USDA put out Bulletin 404, which Paul is very familiar with. And what they try to emphasize is that in order to get the same amount of paper out of trees, the same amount of paper that would grow in 1 acre of hemp in 1 year's time would take 4 years of Douglas fir trees growing perpetually for 20 years to make the same amount of paper that farmers could get off of 1 acre of hemp grown in under a year. And this is when you start looking at the economic viability of hemp, you can see why I say, and Paul says, that in a sense, farmers are being ripped off right now. I mean, I love Willie Nelson. He's been a big advocate for the cause. But those guys can have as many farm aids as they want. But until they realize that it's about hemp, that those farms were built on hemp, and they weren't built on, you know, cotton. I mean, cotton didn't come along for 300 years after we started settling this country. There wasn't a patent on a cotton gin until the 1790s. Yet slavery started in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia, along with the passing of laws that said that farmers had to grow at least 10% of their land as hemp. Because what a lot of your listeners might not realize is that when Columbus arrived in this country, what he found was tobacco. What he expected to find and couldn't find was growing all over Europe and was cannabis hemp. And without it, he couldn't mend his sails, he couldn't mend his ropes, he couldn't repaint his boat, he couldn't get home. So sailors back 300-400 years ago had to set sail with barrels full of hemp seeds, because if they happened to crash somewhere that didn't have hemp, that was their main ingredient. That was their source material that they would be able to grow, be able to process, and fix their ships with. Without it, they were shipped out of luck, is basically what they were. And when these people landed in North America, what they immediately started doing was trying to plant hemp so that they could get independent of Europe. Because without hemp, we had to take all of our drug money, which was our tobacco money. We had to buy all of our blankets and our beddings and our everything cloth, everything paper, all of the ship sails, all of the ropes. We had to buy it back from Europe, which kept our country broke. So why our forefathers demanded that we grow hemp is so that we could keep that economy here. So we need it now in the 21st century as much as we needed it back in the 14, 15, 1600s.
Yeah, it's really a matter of social and economic justice because, you know, we don't need to give all of our money to the petrochemical companies. We can give it to our farmers. Instead of petrochemical companies stashing it away in their Swiss bank accounts or investing in tar sands in Saskatchewan or molybdenum. Huh?
I would like to point this out. Anybody can go online and look at photographs of Dubai 20 years ago. It was a desert, okay? You go back to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, before, you know, Zapata Oil and Bush 1 started drilling there, and it was a desert. And all of the money that we have put into the petrochemical industry could have been spread out all over North America had one simple decision been made, and that was to allow the patent from Rudolph Diesel, which developed the diesel engine to run on vegetable-based oil. His concept with the diesel engine was to fit it into the ecosystem. He believed that he could create a machine that would run off of the vegetable oils created by the plants that grew from the soil it plowed. So it fit right in. But when we started fueling our machines with these dead dinosaurs, the Saudis got rich, the Saudi Arabia got rich, Dubai grew like a weed, but our farmers went broke. And the reality is this isn't an accident. This was corporate manipulation with our capitalistic economy, allowing our farmers to go broke. Because realistically, I think the government's enjoying taking their land. I think the government didn't like homesteading in some ways, and now they're going back there. They've created an economy that the farmers cannot compete in. And now when they can't pay their taxes, and they're not the ones getting rich like the guys in Dubai with the little cap on the oil well, well, they're losing their land back to the government, who's then selling it to mega corporations and parceling it out. And I think it's a manipulation of again, the capitalist system. The same government that said, go west and multiply, and you build a fence, you can keep the land, is now coming in and saying, sorry, we're going to create an economic situation you can't compete in, and if you don't like that, too bad, we want the land back. And I think American farmers should really start looking at this more realistically and being angry, because, like I keep saying, hemp aid can be up there on stage with all the celebrity endorsements they want, but until they start telling the truth, until they start focusing on the fact that these farms were not built on the commodities they're allowed to grow right now, that they were built on the canvas-covered wagons that went west, they were built on the rope walks of Boston, they were built on the sail manufacturing that went on everywhere, all around the country as we try to build our nation. That's what these farms were really built on. And realistically, this is what we need now. We need to be independent of these oil sources from Saudi Arabia. We need to see places like Saudi Arabia go back.
I got to jump in here right now, because what I need right now is to take a commercial break so we can pay our bills. Reminder that tomorrow the 2-hour broadcast is commercial free, but today that is not the case. We will be having a groovy little tune about how wonderful marijuana is, and then come back and pick up where we've left off here at Time for Hemp.
It's time for hemp prohibition to end. The Cannabis Legalization Movement has long waited to have congressional or Senate hearings to present the failure of drug prohibition, medical benefits of cannabis, and more. Time for Hemp is tired of waiting for the cannabis movement to get such an invitation and has organized this 2-hour conference series special. Time for Hemp will be hosting live specials to produce a global cannabis summit with some of the most brilliant minds and amazing leaders of the industrial hemp and medical cannabis movement. This presentation will be broadcasted live on American Freedom Radio, online, AM, FM stations across America, and on Roku, and will be archived at American Freedom Radio and on iTunes. During each commercial-free broadcast, moderators will conduct discussions with 6 expert panelists brought together from all corners of the earth to present the most current research and statistics concerning this trillion-dollar industry. Tune in live starting each Friday this August at 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This special presentation is being hosted by Casper Leach on AmericanFreedomRadio.com.
Green Glass Clean is a 100% green liquid cleaner that is designed to wash the toughest resin stains from pipes, bongs, and hookahs. Green Glass Clean is safe to use on glass, plastic, ceramic, wood, and about anything you smoke from, so you can enjoy the full flavor of your smoke. Green Glass Clean is easy to use. Just dilute a small amount, then soak, rinse, and dry. Green Glass Clean will gently dissolve any stuck-on crud from your pipe, keeping your smoking gear fresh and clean. Order Green Glass Clean at greenglassclean.com. And for those stubborn, hard-to-reach resin spots that just won't come off, there is the Gak Attack Brush Pack. Gak Attack Brush Pack keeps your smoking gear clean and looking shiny. The tough yet gentle nylon bristles scrub and scrape buildups and residue with ease. Wire-braided handle bends for easy maneuvering without damaging your smoking apparatus. Using the Gak Attack Brush Pack with Green Glass Clean will keep your pipes, bongs, and hookahs clean. Order your Gak Attack Brush Pack by going to gakattack.com.
You're listening to the future of talk. American Freedom Radio. This is American Freedom Radio.
Oh, Babylon to stop by. Half of me angry and love get high. I stand myself.
Woke up this morning, it and over, because from last night, me under me water.
Say what now?
It got me feeling like the room was spinning around.
That's the real thing.
If I was smoking the real thing, I would have be safe and sound. What do I need now? Good Cali weed. What do I need now, y'all? Give me the tree.
Weed is nice. That's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice. The bunker blaze it a day and blaze it a night. Weed is nice. That's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice. Blaze it a day and blaze it a night. Early in the morning, as high man rise. Give thanks to the Father, to open my eyes. My spirit, my chalwa, I'll be there by my side. In the cool morning, breeze, the birds them living life. Under my feet, I'm feeling the vibes. For the rest of the day, that keep me alive. To be nice all the time is my joy and my pride. My good gun just let me push the top prescribe. I could live without my rum and I could live without my stout, but my strong ganja I could not live without. Ganja from me is the west, the north and the south. Keep my chalice blazing, I know my chalice never out. Some say the drugs are what them talking about. Get your with us, let them try you down a courthouse. Be about the money if you want come back out. To the prosecutor and all the judge me a shout. Weed is nice, that's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice, blaze it a day and blaze it a night. Weed is nice, that's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice, blaze it a day and blaze it a night.
I grade, that's all I need. All I need. I grade, see, all day. Don't want no cocaine, it could mess up my brain. Take back your morphine, won't stick me in the vein. No.
What is that?
No, want your crack, I say. Cause me no in a die. No. Don't want to be walking while my belly is touching that bar. Give me the weed now. Give me good Cali weed. Give me. What do I need now, y'all? Give me the tree. What do I need? I need. Give me the weed. Give me. Say give me the weed now, y'all. Good Cali weed.
Weed is nice, that's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice, blaze it a day and blaze it a night. Weed is nice, that's why me have to light up my chalice pipe. Weed is nice, blaze it a day and blaze it a night.
Yes, weed is nice, but so is industrial hemp, something that our farmers need to have in order for our survival for the future as a human race and for our economies to continue. It is the first day of August. We've had an exciting week, to say the least, in hemp history. This week in hemp history, they began selling medical marijuana in Washington, D.C. And not only is that happening, but Uruguay has now ended prohibition. And so that makes 2 states in America and an entire country that has said it really is time for hemp. On the program today, we are kicking off a great presentation of the global summit about how we need to end prohibition, and we are talking about industrial hemp with my joint host Paul Stanford and our joint guest Todd McCormick. Gentlemen, I'll let you pick up where we left off before the commercial break here on Time for Hemp.
I'm really glad you're spending this time because I really think that a lot of people, especially the people that use cannabis, don't really get the significance of what the hemp history really means. I mean, I believe that Paul does when he made the joke about what prohibition is really about, is about the lucrative industrial industry, making sure that there's no competition for them. But
that was no joke. That's not a joke. That's a tragedy.
No. It is a tragedy. That's a great line right there. It's true, and it is, and that's the point that I think we're really trying to make, is that realistically, cannabis prohibition or marijuana prohibition has never really been about marijuana. I really think that it was more just a racial trigger, a racial lever they could use to take it away from people that would never have allowed them to prohibit hemp or cannabis. You have to realize that when Congress went for the Marijuana Tax Act, they used a mongrel word that nobody understood. And anybody listening to this should really take a few minutes if they're into the history and go back and read the transcripts from the Ways and Means Committee before they actually, the House and Means Committee, House and Ways Committee, before they actually passed what ended up being the Marijuana Tax Act, because they took 4 days of testimony. And for 3 days, they listened to a bunch of farmers and paint manufacturers and people that did not know that marijuana was this old English word hemp or cannabis, because the government had specifically used the term, like I would say it like this. Back in the 30s, if I had walked up to anybody listening to this and said, hey, they're going to make a plant called Awesome illegal, you would have looked at me and said, I've never heard of a plant called Awesome or marijuana. And if you had went and looked it up in every pharmacopoeia, every written or every encyclopedia up to that time, you would not find a plant called Awesome, as did none of the farmers find a plant called marijuana. And with that said, the government was able to then usher in legislation under the nose of so many people that didn't realize what it was. And the director, the legislative council of the American Medical Association, he went so far as to write Congress and berate them, saying that what you're doing is going to serve no good purpose whatsoever, and how far it may prove to deny people the benefits of a medicine that is yet foreseen is impossible to tell. And that was a very poignant remark, because it ended up becoming the truth, because the government prohibited what they didn't even understand at the time. When the government stepped up and prohibited what they were calling marijuana, they didn't even know what THC was. They thought that what got us high was something was called at the time the Adams 9 compound. And they didn't even know what THC was. They didn't know how safe it was. They didn't know how effective it was medicinally. They just basically listened to the social, the economic influence of these big companies and passed these laws that were not good for the people in society, but were great for big business. And marijuana laws have never been about protecting society from marijuana. Governments will let you drink till you have cirrhosis. They'll let you smoke cigarettes until you have black lung. They don't care about you. But what they care about is the economic feasibility of the people that put them in power and put them in office. And I don't think I'm surprised, or at least I feel like I'm not surprised with Obama. Anybody that raises over $500 million to become president owes a lot of favors to a lot of people. And I'm not surprised to see that he's cracking down on medical marijuana. And I'm not surprised to see that they're doing nothing to promote a sound and, there's no hope, there's no change. There's just more crony capitalism is what we're looking at. Paul?
Well, of course, I completely agree with that. The song at the break was Weed is Nice, and, there's this false dichotomy that we have. We believe that hemp and marijuana are different plants. And the fact of the matter is, they are the same plant. They're cannabis sativa. And most of the strains that I grow in my Oregon licensed medical marijuana garden are mixes of indica and sativa varieties. But, what they've done is they've prohibited the plant, where they allow the low THC hemp up in Canada and Europe. While, I'm sure it's good for the car auto bodies, and we do get some nice hemp foods finally for the first time in several generations that are on the shelves at the health food store. What they've done is they've bred these plants that have virtually no THC, less than 0.3% THC. And the way they've done that is they have bred out the flowers. And by breeding out the flowers, they've bred out the THC, but also the seeds. And it's the seed that we really need. It's really about hemp seed oil and its competition with petrochemical alternatives. You know, if we could get hemp seed oil in from high THC plants that have lots of flowers and big buds, then it'd be 20 times more productive than these low THC dwarf hemp plants that they allow in Canada and Europe. The whole dichotomy that they've convinced us of, that these are different plants, is false. They're really the same plant. Hemp, cannabis, marijuana, they all come from the same plant. And when we remove these artificial regulations that create this economic barrier to the full utilization of hemp fuel and fiber, then we'll see a complete reversal of this economic pyramid where the money will flow to the people instead of to a few people at the top.
Well, you know, I'd like to interject something. You know, I had the great privilege of pre-reading a book that I urge everybody to go out and buy. It's called Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany by Robert C. Clark and Mark Merlin. Robert Clark brought you the two books, Marijuana Botany and Hashish.
I have it on pre-order
for
several months.
That is so cool. And it's an interesting thing, though. One of the main points they make, Mark and Rob makes in the book, which is going to shake up the marijuana world, is that nobody smokes sativa. I'll say it again. Nobody smokes sativa. What we're referring to when we call plant sativa is really equatorial drug variety. When you think about cannabis history in the 50s and 60s, a lot of what we were smoking was coming in was from Vietnam, Thailand, Colombia, Acapulco Gold, Michoacan, Jamaican, Maui Wowie. All of this stuff we would now call sativa. None of it is. What it really is an equatorial drug variety. Because if you were to go to India, and if you look at the word indica on face value, it means of or like India. And back in the day, let's say Columbus's day, if I walked up to Paul and I handed him some seeds, he would have two questions for me. One question would be sativa, which meant, is it the cannabis sativa, which is a Latin suffix, which basically means so widely or most useful? Or is it indica, he would ask me, because that means, is it of or like India? Because even back in the day, Columbus was trying to get to India because he wanted a quicker path to the spices. Cannabis was no question one of the highly most traded spices. And indica, grown near Goa, which is a very tropical southern tip of India, is very much indica. But it looks like and smokes like, it smells like what we call sativa, because what it really is a tropical southern variety of plants found in India that were cultivated and bred for drug variety. And now, as you get into northern India and places like the Himalayas, you get a dual-use plant. You get plants that, to this day, are turned into hashish, but then are also turned into the clothing and the fabrics and to some of the things that the necessities that are used by the locals in an industrial way. And you know, the metaphor Paul was making earlier about Dobermans and Chihuahuas, I made years ago on Politically Incorrect, because I was being berated about marijuana use and hemp and medical, and I said, look, we all have seen dogs. Okay, we know what a dog is. Cannabis is like a dog. There's a big difference between a Great Dane and a Chihuahua, and still a dog. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about cannabis hemp. There are so many different varieties of cannabis, actually, that do have low THC for sure. But there are other varieties that have higher THC and have still been used traditionally as a dual-use industrial and drug plant in the Hindu Kush Mountains, in places like Nepal and Malaya, all through India and such. And it's going to be, I think, hard for people that are used to the word sativa to get away from it. But literally what people meant when they said sativa in Europe was the Indo-European hemp variety. The question what sativa was is, can I turn it into rope? Can I turn it into paints and varnishes? Can I turn it into fabrics and paper and things I need every day? Or is it indica? Is it going to get me high? And everybody, I again urge anybody listening to go, pre-order like Paul did the book, Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany, because it's really a milestone in cannabis publishing, and I urge everybody to check it out.
Well, I look forward to getting my copy once it's off. I think it's coming very soon.
Yeah, look for some of my photos in it. I contributed to the book. It's a fantastic work, and these guys spent a good 15, 20 years on it, and have put together another amazing work of art. I mean, this book is going to serve so many of us in better understanding the cannabis plant, its origins, and how it has evolved along with humanity, because humans have taken cannabis everywhere all over the world. And when you look at the natural path that cannabis has taken, humans have been the one taking it with them. For instance, I, some years ago, was talking to an American Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, and I asked her if she was going to, at the time, support some legislation that Barney Frank was putting forward to decriminalize. And she said, of course she was. And I said, before you break around patting yourself on the back, I said, Maxine, when are you going to get sent back to the American farmers?
Exactly. I got to jump in here because we got to give ourselves back to a commercial break so we can pay our bills. And I do want to remind people that tomorrow we start an hour earlier than we normally do here on Time for Hemp.
Time for hemp prohibition to end. The Cannabis Legalization Movement has long waited to have Congressional or Senate hearings to present the failure of drug prohibition, medical benefits of cannabis, and more. Time for Hemp is tired of waiting for the cannabis movement to get such an invitation and has organized this 5 2-hour conference series special. Time for Hemp will be hosting live specials to produce a global cannabis summit with some of the most brilliant minds and amazing leaders of the industrial hemp and medical cannabis movement. This presentation will be broadcasted live on American Freedom Radio, online, AM/FM stations across America, and on Roku, and will be archived at American Freedom Radio and on iTunes. During each commercial-free broadcast, moderators will conduct discussions with 6 expert panelists brought together from all corners of the earth to present the most current research and statistics concerning this trillion-dollar industry. Tune in live starting each Friday this August at 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This special presentation is being hosted by Casper Leach on AmericanFreedomRadio.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Tree of Life, sung by Human.
I want to tell you all a little bit about a plant I know that can save the world. It grows long and tall and has flowers that can make your mind swirl. It's a funky plant with a fiber that is resistant to rain and mold. It's the strongest plant fiber known to man, the best rope you'll ever hold. Well, the pioneers covered up the wagon trains with a canvas made of hemp. And Washington and Jefferson grew it on their farms and said to make the most of it. First stars and stripes were sewn on hemp, first Constitution too. It's used around the world for food, fiber, oil, medicine, and fuel. And if we press its seeds, we won't have no need for any other oil. We can make paints and inks, or run our car, we'll go back next season. It'll fix the soil, the most nutritious seed we can put in our mouth with omega-6 and 3. We can feed the world with the tree of life and live sustainably. But if we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to breathe. Grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plant grown wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa.
They often call it dope. Can also be made into oil or rope. Some people say you smoke it and you feel fantastic, but from hemp you can make an alternative to plastic. Made from plants, not petroleum, you see, so it won't still be around in 4003. It can biodegrade, which means there'll be less pollution. Just another reason for a hemp revolution.
Patients eat their food, helps those with depression overcome the blues. Glaucoma, epilepsy, nausea, insomnia, stress, neurosis, psychosis, pain, PMS. All the studies have been done and all the doctors agree, but they can't make money off this plant, you see, because it's free. It grows from a seed, wild and free like we ought to be. You know the future is grown in our own backyards. If we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We'll grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our pay, build a house from it. It's the God's plan, growing wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa.
In the mid-1930s, it was the billion-dollar crop. With the invention of the recorder, they could produce it non-stop. But then the smear campaign with Mexicans to blame started making people thinking to make your brain go pop. Yeah, since then it's never stopped. It ain't like getting high for paint and crack rock. Time to bring it back to nature, time to bring back some life. Let the farmers do their job, stop giving them strife. Renewable resources, life-giving forces. Panels for your cars and saddles for your horses. DuPont, Monsanto, making the wrong choices. Suicide genes, extinguishing our voices. Cutting down the trees, polluting the 7 seas. Leaving the fate of the planet to the corporate entities. Corrupt politics, warfare, disease. Now it's time to make a change. It's time to plant seeds.
Focus on nutrition, you the oil seeds. It gives you all the protein you will ever need. You can make it in a sandwich with jelly or jam, or make it in a soap or a lotion for your hands. You can make it into fuel, put it right in our cars, then we won't need the oil and won't have to start wars. You can make it into paper, write as much as you please, cause it grows like a weed and we won't have to cut trees. So put your faith in hemp, such a versatile plant, and don't let the government tell us we can't, cause hemp can help us all in so many ways, and it doesn't mean that we will all be living in a day. It's versatility, sustainability, look at history, it ain't no mystery, hemp for victory.
If we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We'll grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plan, growing wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa. So in this modern day and age, when we seem to lack spirituality, this one single plant can bring us back almost 10,000 years in history. To the Shiva, Piranhas, the Jesus, the Christ, to the Buddha, the pagans, the goddess, the light, to commune with all the animals, to go with all the trees, to realize we gotta seek us inside me. As the earth is the mother, we gotta take care of the earth, cause the earth is the mother that gives life birth. And we can heal all our relations with a single green plant, and we can start right now.
We got to legalize, we're gonna come alive. All the people who know what's up, gonna say what the heck we letting these suckers get away with it for. Come on and open the door. Are you with me? Are you with me? It's gonna take more than heavens to shut the suckers down. We're not fooling around, but they're keeping us divided, opposite-sided. What do we Americans do? We keep buying it. Black and white, they're making us fight, and still in the same racist hatred justifies bombing third world nations. Gotta wake up to see the real enemy is the powers that be. From the opposition, see, wake up now to nature's creation. Sacred herb can unite the nations. Gotta legalize the herb of adoration. All of this use is gonna heal the nation. Heal the nation. Heal the nation. Gonna heal the nation. Gonna heal the nation.
American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
I'm kinda high, let me excuse myself. but it seems like it's just moments since we met. I'm kinda high. Let me introduce myself.
Yeah, baby, let me introduce myself. I am the host of this illustrious broadcast known as Time for Hemp. I am Casper Leach. You are listening to Time for Hemp live all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com, AM, FM stations across America on the Roku network. We are kicking off the 2013 Global Summit, Time for Hemp Prohibition to End. We have waited too long to be invited to speak in front of the Congress, in front of the Senate, in front of the United Nations leaders, and present our message: the need to end hemp prohibition, the need to reintroduce industrial hemp back into the farm community, the need to allow medical marijuana to be given to people who are in desperate pain and are on death's door. What a horrible waste of resources it is to take tax dollars and to lock up humans as if they were cattle, as if they were nothing more than a little slave, make that human work for 40 cents an hour, and keep it there for 5 years because they had touched a plant. Seriously? This is stupid. This is insane. This makes no sense. None of it makes any sense. Seriously. If you look at it from the top down, other than chasing the dollars and making greedy people more rich, none of it makes sense. How do we allow it to occur? We need to find a way to make an end. And from tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., to the very last broadcast 5 weeks from tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. when we conclude, we're going to cover all those topics here on Time for Hemp. Picking back up where we left off on the topic of industrial hemp, my joint host Paul Stafford and our joint guest Todd McCormick were having an amazing conversation. Gentlemen, please pick up where you left off.
Well, I was saying that I was in a conversation with Maxine, and I was asking the Congresswoman basically when the Congress was going to give hemp back to the American farmers. And she looked at me rather perplexed when I said, give it back. And I said, yeah, re-legalize. And she said, re-legalize? I said, Maxine, I ask you this. You allow, as a Congresswoman, the DEA to run around and destroy hemp because it's not indigenous to the North American continent. So my question to you is, where did it come from? And sadly, she, a 25-year Congresswoman with very much a college degree, couldn't answer that simple question. And I actually was blown away at that and said, Maxine, rumor has it you're black. You should know a thing or two about your history. And realistically, don't you know that the same laws on slavery were started at the same time with mandatory cultivation laws of cannabis? And her jaw dropped. And this is the problem I have, is that if people that are sitting in Congress, that are elected representatives who are voting on these laws, are so ignorant of their own history that they're allowing corporations to sway their decisions without even looking into the past, without even actually doing the due diligence in their homework, we as society are really screwed. And we have to stand up and start demanding more from these people because, I let her know that while I've been a fan of much of her liberal will say policies, I was disgusted at the idea that she did not know her own history. It really was. And this is more common than it is uncommon. And it's up to us to change that by teaching people what we've learned. Go ahead, Paul.
A while ago you mentioned when they made marijuana illegal and how, I believe it was Dr. Woodward who represented the AMA, he went into committee and said, you can't make this marijuana illegal. It's cannabis. Cannabis has a lot of medical uses. Of course, the heads of that committee went to the floor of Congress and lied and said the American Medical Association supported marijuana prohibition back in 1937. But if you look at the transcript, the Speaker of the House then, as he was for over 30 years, was Sam Rayburn of Bonham, Texas. Sam Rayburn grew hemp back on his farm in Bonham, Texas. So he introduced and said, this is a bill about something called marijuana. So he didn't even know he was prohibiting a crop. that he grew back home. But that was the whole purpose of renaming it marijuana, because nobody knew what that was. You know?
So the congressman was voting to turn himself into a criminal. He didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Not just the congressman. He was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In fact, he was Speaker longer than any other person in U.S. history. But again, it's all about money and power. And we've got to re-educate people about the history of cannabis. And I know you were talking about Ben Dronkers and the Hemp and Cannabis Museum in Barcelona and Amsterdam. I think Casper mentioned something, like there's a marijuana leaf on a statue in Barcelona.
Yeah,
you know about that?
If you go to Barcelona at the end of the Rambla, there is a statue that's very high with Columbus standing at the top of it pointing to the New World. And very suspiciously, or not, depending on how you look at it, we adorn statues with plants all the time. But it looks like, you'll love this, Paul, hemp stalk going up the side of the statue, and at the top of the hemp stalk looks like a big 7-pointed hemp leaf. And anybody listening to this can go right on Google and search for high-resolution images of the statue of Columbus in Barcelona and see for yourself, and you tell me what you think those patterns of plant leaves look when you consider what plant was responsible for so much of that ship. The ship would not have exploded.
I'm going to go to Barcelona just after our Hemp Stock Festival, which you should come to, Todd. We'll put you up in a hotel. It's September 7th and 8th. We'd love to have you come to that. But on the 10th, I'm going to fly for the first time ever to Spain, because the kind folks at Expo Grow in San Sebastian, Spain, have invited me to come and talk about cannabis reform in the United States. So I am very honored to be on a panel with your friend, Ben Dronkers, and Steve D'Angelo, that ends the forums at the Expo Grow in San Sebastian here. That panel's on September 14th. So I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
That's great. They invited me to come speak last year, and I wasn't able to go, but it was a really great event. A lot of people, the feedback was fantastic. You know, you're going to love it. People listening, Spain has really broken out into becoming the new Amsterdam of Europe. They have what are called smoking clubs, and it's kind of like a private club where if you're a member, you're allowed to do things within the confines of the club that are legal as a community. And now one of the things they're doing is smoking and growing, because it turns out that Spain didn't have any real laws against cannabis cultivation. And so now they've got a better climate than Holland, and it's really blowing up. And wait until you see the museum, Ben, that Ben did, Paul.
I'm looking forward to it. I've seen some pictures.
Yeah, everybody listening, Ben Dronkers is a wonderful man that purchased the first hemp museum in the 80s from Ed Rosenthal and another gentleman and renovated it into a world-class facility, expanded it in the 90s when his interest in environmental hemp grew, and created the Hemp Gallery down the street. So it's 2 museums. And then went even further in the 90s and purchased a 500-year-old former palace of the Spanish Revolutionary Guard. When France was occupying Spain, this palace was used by the revolutionary freedom fighters for Spain. And it's really an amazing place of history when you think of the struggles that we're going through, and, you know, the occupation we're all dealing with the government's intrusion in our lives. You know, when we can't grow flowers, it's just amazing. I mean, people listening might not know it, but I served 5 years in federal prison because after California changed their law, I became one of the first people they arrested for growing medical marijuana. And it astounded me that, you know, they will lock up somebody that has no criminal record and grew flowers with people that murder and create mayhem and the worst, and think it's okay. And when they treat us like we're criminals for simply really growing flowers and being a farmer, it's the worst assault on our liberty that's possible. And, you know, when you listen to people in America talking about, you know, losing their gun rights, it's silly because they've already lost their rights to grow a flower. And honestly, if you were ever going to stand up for the sake of anything's liberty, it would have to be for the sake of a flower to grow, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about hemp farming and we're talking about medical marijuana and cannabis use as adults. It's really just about growing flowers and not being afraid to grow the seeds that the earth has given you, in light of the government holding a gun to your head and saying, be afraid of me, be very afraid of me. And
Well,
that's
we
what
have about 1 minute left. I regret to say we would love to have you back again, Todd. Please give a shout out to your website, and then we'll direct to Paul.
Join us at hemp.xxx, and thank you for having me on very much. And Paul, thank you so much. And you guys, it's always great listening to you, and you putting out the information is really what the whole earth needs. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Awesome. And Paul, you're back tomorrow with me as a moderator with the Global Hemp Summit.
With Andrea Herman.
You and, yeah.
The North American Hemp Association. But yeah, my site, hemp.org, HEMP.org.
Yes, and you and Andrea are both the moderators of the program tomorrow, and we have a great lineup of guests kicking off 2 hours of commercial-free, uninterruption of knowledge that you can take to the world and let them know how important it is that we all stop and take time for hemp.